Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling a really quiet question, one that a lot of leaders, a lot of very committed people carry around, but they rarely say it out loud. What if our biggest obstacle in our work, in our deepest commitments, what if it isn't a lack of funding or a bad strategy, but just a fundamental misunderstanding of sacrifice itself?
And that's the paradox, isn't it? Our sources really bring this out for centuries. Mission culture has kind of celebrated hardship, right?
Yeah.
Intense self-denial.
Typical narrative.
It is. But when you actually look at the results, you see this a massive contradiction. You have some incredibly committed people who just burn out. Their relationships fracture, they get disillusioned. And then you have others facing the same things who endure with this incredible clarity and resilience.
So it's not about the level of difficulty. It's not the suffering. It's the quality of the commitment.
Precisely. And that's the goal of this deep dive. We want to give you the framework that explains that difference. We're diving into a concept called sacrificial commitment, or SCQ.
Press CQ.
And our mission here is really to shift that whole conversation.
Right.
To move away from this idea of, reckless self-emptying.
Right.
And towards something that's voluntary, informed, and this is key, sustained.
Okay, let's unpack that.
Yeah.
Because the big distinction we have to make right up front is that sacrifice is not really about how much you lose.
No.
Or how much pain you're in. It's about why you're doing it, how you're doing it, and for what purpose you choose to give yourself away. That's the whole game.
That's the difference between integrity and total collapse.
So in these kinds of leadership or mission environments, sacrifice often just feels assumed. It's the unspoken rule.
It is. Give more, endure longer, complain less, always be available.
You're actually applauded for running on fumes. So why do the sources say this unexamined sacrifice is so dangerous?
Well, because when sacrifice is romanticized, instead of, being thoughtfully discerned and audited, it subtly shifts.
Yeah.
It moves from being this act of free, informed obedience that's rooted in grace to an act of compulsion. It's rooted in expectation, either internal or external. And that's the moment it becomes corrosive.
It becomes a performance, not a spiritual act.
Exactly. That compulsion, that pressure, it's why you see leaders stay in roles when, honestly, wisdom is screaming for them to transition or just rest. It's why families get strained to the breaking point, feeling like collateral damage for some noble calling. And I think most dangerously, it's where suffering starts being treated as proof of faithfulness.
Badge of honor.
A badge of honor, yeah. Instead of a reality that you have to steward carefully and strategically.
Which is, ironically, a recipe for total organizational failure in the long
No,
run.
it's a huge strategic liability.
Right.
Especially now. The landscape has changed. You've got global instability, rising complexity, a much greater awareness of mental health.
Right. Team well-being.
Totally. So organizations that don't figure out how to articulate a healthy, disciplined practice of SCQ, they're going to struggle. They'll struggle to retain their best leaders, and they'll lose credibility. You just can't sustain that pace of unexamined sacrifice.
So the argument is settled then. Sacrifice is required for anything that costs something. But the real question, the one the sources are asking, is whether our understanding of it is, biblical, wise, and ultimately life-giving. That's a huge internal audit for anyone listening.
It is.
So if that's the ideal, this true SCQ, just look at where people fall off the wagon.
Yeah.
The material highlights two main extremes that just miss the mark. What's that first one? The common one.
The first distortion is what's termed romanticized or heroic sacrifice. This is just pervasive in cultures that valorize hardship.
Okay.
In this mindset, suffering carries this unspoken spiritual capital. Exhaustion is spiritualized. Burnout gets almost, baptized as faithfulness.
And that creates this performance culture where just asking for help feels like you're admitting some kind of spiritual defeat.
Absolutely. And with that mindset, people start to ignore their clear limits. They suppress their needs, physical and emotional. And tragically, they often start to see anyone who questions these unsustainable systems, the people who push for health and boundaries, as lacking real faith.
Right. They're not all in.
Exactly.
You mentioned a case example in the source material, this composite of a missionary couple that really makes it feel real. Can you walk us through the warning signs they missed?
I can. So they were celebrated everywhere for their dedication, but internally, they were just blowing past every single stop sign. They started missing mandatory team meetings, saying they were too busy, but they wouldn't delegate anything. Their spending got erratic, which is often a sign of emotional exhaustion. And then this is the crucial part. Their children started showing these acute signs of stress, lashing out, withdrawing.
And what did they do?
They ignored it. Or they rationalized it, you know? The harvest is plentiful, the devil is trying to distract us.
So the sacrifice was real, it was intense, but it was self-inflicted. And ultimately, it was just destructive.
Precisely. Within 5 years, that relentless push led to a severe marital fracture, serious health problems, and just profound disillusionment across their whole team. Sacrificial commitment without formation.
Mm.
It doesn't glorify God, it just consumes people because it was unsupported, unexamined, and just fundamentally unsustainable.
That is a heavy cost. And the counter-reaction to that, which is totally understandable, is the second distortion. Avoided or rejected sacrifice. You're so wary of that harm that you minimize all cost.
Right. In this reaction, any expectation of suffering is seen as inherently dangerous. It's a sign of a toxic system. And the implicit theology just flips to the other extreme. God is most pleased when we're protected from cost, when you're comfortable.
And while that's trying to address real harm, what's the cost of minimizing all cost?
The cost is hollowness. I mean, when you edit the expectation of cost right out of discipleship, what you're left with is a mission that is safe and efficient and completely hollow.
It loses its power.
It loses its transformative power. The moment you insulate yourself from all risk taken in faith, you accidentally edit out the possibility of any real, powerful, faith-filled growth.
So we're stuck between being consumed on one side and being hollow on the other.
Yeah.
That tension is where this SCQ framework comes in.
It does, and a good analogy is fire. Think of sacrifice as fire. If it's uncontained, it just burns everything indiscriminately. It consumes the forest and the family.
Right.
But if you extinguish it, if you reject it, it provides no warmth, no light, no power. The SCQ's solution is to form that fire within a hearth. That hearth is your spiritual formation, your clarity, your community, and that is what allows the commitment to sustain life and mission for the long haul.
I like that analogy of the hearth.
Mhm.
It grounds us in this idea that true SCQ, it's not fueled by guilt or this need to be a hero. It's fueled by clarity and love. So where do the sources anchor this theologically?
It's anchored in a really crucial principle that sacrifice is always a response, not an initiation. It is. Biblically, self-giving never initiates a relationship with God or earns his favor. It flows out of grace you've already received. I mean, the classic text here is Romans 12:1. Therefore, I urge you, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice.
And I want to pause on that because that phrase, in view of God's mercy, it changes everything. It means the sacrifice is an act of gratitude.
Precisely. If you take away that grounding in God's mercy first, the sacrifice immediately becomes coercive. It's about earning, or it becomes destructive. True SCQ starts with receiving, long before it ever thinks about giving.
And if we look at Jesus as the pattern for this, I mean, the ultimate sacrifice, it's so important to see that his self-giving was not impulsive. It wasn't the result of burnout.
Not at all. His was a model of discipline-informed self-giving. He explicitly counted the cost. Luke 14 talks about that. But just as importantly, he maintained fierce relational boundaries. He withdrew for rest and prayer, even when the crowds were pressing in and the need felt overwhelming.
Like in Mark's gospel, he doesn't just power through. He leaves, he recalibrates, and then he returns with renewed purpose.
Right. So the cross was the culmination of perfect, chosen obedience. It wasn't the final stage of depletion or some emotional breakdown.
That's the key insight then. Christian sacrifice isn't about disappearing for God. It's about being faithfully given to God's purposes in God's way.
On God's schedule, it requires a clear sense of your own limits, which, paradoxically, is what makes the true final sacrifice even possible.
Okay, so to help us discern this in our own lives, the SCQ framework gives 4 clear markers. These are the standards to measure our commitment against.
Exactly. These are the actionable takeaways.
Let's break them down. The first mark is that healthy sacrifice must be voluntary. How is that different from just feeling obligated?
Voluntary means it is chosen freely. It comes out of love and gratitude, not from coercion or guilt or fear of what someone will think of you. It means you chose the cost, not the convenience. If you feel resentful every time you do it, it's probably not voluntary anymore. It's slipped into compulsion.
That makes a lot of sense. The second mark is informed. And that seems tied directly to that idea of counting the cost.
Absolutely. Informed means it's anchored in wisdom, in scripture, and in a really brutal self-awareness of your own limits. It means you have to objectively assess the impact on your family, the financial cost, your physical resources. It is not blind self-denial.
So you need an audit.
You do. If you feel this deep calling, but your closest, wisest friends are telling you your pace is destructive, your sacrifice is probably uninformed.
Okay, that's a good check. The third mark is sustained.
Sustained commitment is practiced consistently over time. It integrates work and rest and prayer. It's that long obedience in the same direction, not just a series of heroic moments followed by a crash.
Right. Episodic heroics.
Yeah, that burns bright and fades fast. Sustained sacrifice maintains a consistent, steady flame that can endure for decades.
And finally, the mark that protects us from that solitary depletion.
This one is non-negotiable for resilience. Sacrifice has to be discerned and sustained in community. Accountability, shared rhythms, these things protect us. The early church discerned calling together, solitary sacrifice, that lone hero thing. It's just so vulnerable to distortion and pride and burnout.
And when those 4 marks are there, you grow resilient, not resentful. Your teams stay honest instead of trying to be heroic.
Exactly.
This framework is so critical, but let's connect it back to the daily grind for leaders. This romanticized version thrives on some common myths. Let's tackle the first one. The myth of endless capacity.
Yes. This myth says that if the mission is important enough, you should be able to push past all human limits. The countercultural truth SCQ offers is that recognizing your finitude, your limits, that's not defeatism, it's actually an act of obedience.
Can you give us a biblical counterexample to that performance mindset?
Oh, absolutely. Look at Elijah in 1 Kings 19. After this massive spiritual victory, he flees. He's exhausted, he's despairing, he's ready to die. Now, in our performance culture, we'd expect God to condemn him for that, for his lack of faith or energy. But how does God respond?
Not with a stern word.
Not at all, with rest and nourishment, a nap and a baked loaf of bread. Only after he's rested does God remission him.
Wait, so the biblical narrative flips the script? We expect condemnation for being exhausted, but Elijah gets a nap and a meal. That is incredibly countercultural.
It's the foundation of healthy SCQ. And look at Paul, too. He acknowledged his own deep limitations, reminding us that God's power is made perfect in weakness. Rest is not the enemy of sacrifice. It's what makes sustained sacrifice possible.
The second myth, and this one causes so much pain, is the myth of total neglect. The idea that your calling justifies ignoring family or security. We've all seen leaders who claim the mission requires, temporary relational neglect.
And SCQ is absolutely clear on this. True, informed commitment never, ever treats people, especially those closest to you, as collateral damage.
Paul was pretty clear on this.
It's very clear. The sources point to 1 Timothy, where Paul insists that caring for your own household is integral to your spiritual health. If your sacrifice is destroying your relational integrity, it's antithetical to Christ's model. It's just not it.
But the urgency of the work feels so real. How do leaders navigate that?
Wise navigation means setting clear boundaries. It means regularly reassessing your commitments to protect your family and your team's health. If your commitment consistently requires you to sacrifice the needs of your primary relationships for the mission, that sacrifice is likely distorted.
It has to be integrated.
It has to be. Healthy commitment should be marked by integrity across all domains of your life.
So the ultimate goal here is that healthy sacrifice is actually life-giving. It multiplies impact, it empowers others, it preserves health, it's purposeful, it's not just suffering for the sake of suffering.
That's exactly.
So this has been a deep dive into sacrificial commitment. It moves us away from that compulsive endurance and toward a voluntary, informed, and sustained commitment, one that's anchored in grace, wisdom, and community. We learn the challenge isn't the cost, but the quality of the commitment we bring to it.
And that framework is just so critical for resilience. The future of mission, or really any enduring leadership role, it doesn't require less self-giving. It requires truer sacrifice. One that honors the costly grace of God without destroying the very people called to serve. This forces every one of us to confront our assumptions about cost and calling.
Which leads us to our final provocative thought for you to take away from this material, something to mull over this week.
If sacrifice is meant to be a life-giving practice, what sacrifice are you currently carrying that God never asked of you? And how would relinquishing it actually strengthen your capacity for long-term obedience?